Facebook live broadcast. I'm Steve Altition, Director of Client Partnerships here at Pacific Cascade Legal. And today I'm here with our personal injury attorney, Terry Hogan, to talk about personal injury cases and automobile insurance. Hey, Terry, how you doing this morning?
Doing pretty good, Steve. As with most mornings at this time of year, we're being poured upon by the clouds and the rain, so it's a little bit wet today, to say the least. But that's why they call us Oregon Duckers, because we're acclimated to the water, to say the least.
We are, and I am also totally ready for sunshine. So, Terry, you've been literally doing personal injury work for decades and have run into probably, I would imagine, any case you can have and any kind of insurance issue you can have. So I'm going to talk to you first about just the basic question that even I get asked sometimes from people, and it's what types of automobile insurance are actually required in Oregon?
In that situation, Steve, we have what are called minimum limits, and then depending upon what the consumer purchases from the insurance carrier, you can have graduated levels of limits of insurance to protect you in case of bodily injury, property damage, and that you find people that are well set in their careers and in their homes, and quite often will purchase even higher limits to protect themselves, and all the way up to $500,000 to $1 million umbrella policies, which is in this day and age isn't unheard of. They weren't as common when I was a young lawyer in the 90s, but now they're becoming a lot more common because the smaller limit policies just don't have any value, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But the minimum limits in Oregon are $2,550, meaning that you have $25,000 per person for bodily injury in a car accident, and then depending on the type of policy, up to usually about $25,000 for property damage, and the minimum limit in Oregon on an automobile, which is very good, is the personal injury protection plan that is part of your premium. That's $15,000 worth of coverage for reasonable and necessary medical expenses for injury sustained as a result of an automobile accident. And it also pays temporary disability payments up to a certain level. And I believe it's like 75% of the loss. And then at the end of a case involving a personal injury, if we go to trial or as part of settlement, we pick up the last piece that they didn't get reimbursed for that temporary wage loss. But with certain policies, you can also purchase increased tip coverage. Some policies I've seen all the way up to $50,000 for personal injury protection, which for the amount of coverage that it gives you with where we are these days with overburdened traffic and people not paying attention and all these things that diverts the driver's attention, and in all injury cases, it's all about careless conduct. And that means that the person didn't get up that morning with the intention to hurt somebody, but their focus wasn't where it should be. And as we know, in any car accident, the main elements are always focus, inattention, failure to maintain control, and reasonable speed based on circumstances. And patience and focus drives all three elements of every car accident. So the bottom line is that when you purchase your insurance, you want to purchase more than minimum limits, because if something bad happens, there's different scenarios, and we're going to talk about those here today, Steve. involving uninsured motorists and underinsured motorists, and the interplay. And when you purchase your premium, you pay for those other elements. Beyond the bodily injury, you purchase uninsured motorists and underinsured so that you can actually use your insurance policy to protect you from motorists that are carrying minimum limits that cause very bad injuries, excuse me, and related issues.
The different coverages, you just kind of talked about three of them. They cover, it sounds like they cover not only, stuff for you to help you if you're hurt or someone, that's in your car's hurt, but also to help liability. So I imagine that getting the highest value you can get for those is just, even if you're just happen to be that person out of focus that day, is really important.
Yes, and the bottom line is that you need more than minimum limits in this society, with the cost of medical care and replacing vehicles and everything else. Minimum limits just doesn't do it. It's from a different age, and we're well past that age, and that's where the real problem is because you've got to have enough money there to take care of you if something bad happens because somebody's driving and not paying attention. This careless conduct can be devastating, literally devastating, and with that focus, you need to make sure that you're protected. And you see a lot of commercials from the insurance companies about that kind of protection. Well, it's true. You need to purchase higher limits, with the contingency being the few dollars that you're paying for increased premiums is well spent if something bad happens.
Yeah. So let's sort of talk about, if I've gotten in an accident and what I should do, especially we've talked about what to do before in sort of general terms, but hear more to talk about what maybe we should do or what you can do if you have insurance. And I guess my first question on that is, well, I have medical insurance. What isn't that enough? Should I use that? How do these insurances kind of interrelate with your accident and maybe your case that you're going to have?
Well, there's an interplay, of course, there, but your private health carrier, whoever that may be, okay, whether say in the Portland metro area we have a variation of medical plans that are available to most folks as employees, or even if you own a business. It can be Kaiser, it can be Providence, it can be Blue Cross, it can be Regency, myriad of carriers to protect you, but they don't have a duty to pay your medical expenses for a car accident because that wasn't related to the basic coverage. Is the clear answer, but quite often they do, and then what we call that is a subrogation claim back against the accident and the primary carrier for the automobile accident. And when I mean primary for the insurance company for the carrier that has responsibility for the accident. It's all driven by that. So, and they don't take responsibility right off the bat. They accept liability for their insured having caused the accident, but then there's a battle or a war that proceeds from that point. When I was a young lawyer, because of the way the rules were set up for service, a war could take place on just trying to get the defendant served. And if you didn't get served, then you lose your lawsuit and your case against the person who caused the accident. Well, the legislature in the 90s responded to that, and instead of there being a swamp or a quagmire there that you would literally get stuck in and not be able to move forward, not get your money damages caused by this person, they changed the rules and made it very easy to serve these people. So then the war shifted to the adverse carrier attacking you on the scope of the injuries and the person's damages for medical expenses and what we call bodily injury. So the bottom line is that it shifted, and just because they've accepted liability doesn't mean that you're going to get made whole.
Yeah. What if you, I mean, I know my insurance guy says if you ever get in an accident, you pick up the phone and you call and report to me right now. and is that really what I should be doing? Should I, even my own insurance company, who I guess may have to pay for some of my stuff, should I just call them and make statements and talk to them just the same day, the same hour? Should I wait for like you to step in? When should I call, I guess, my insurance company?
You want to give a notice immediately to your insurance company when an accident takes place. That and your insurance company or any insurance company doesn't respond to anything until they get alerted that there's been a proof of loss. And in an automobile accident, the proof of loss is a PIP application, the personal injury protection application. That's where you give the formal written notice to the insurance company as to the scope of the accident and the injuries that you sustained and whether you have medical treatment and temporary wage loss related to the accident. So that's a very tough question, and usually I respond to it this way, Steve. If you've got any way to, because there's such an interplay on what this person caused when you're not at fault, that if you have an ability to talk to your lawyer immediately or call their office and get some advice, I would do it. It's just that important. But your insurance company is supposed to be in your corner. And that means that they're supposed to be there to protect you because you purchased that protection. And so you just want to be very candid with your insurance company. And usually it's not your insurance company that's trying to take a recorded statement. It's the adverse one. And so you never want to give a recorded statement to the adverse carrier without having talked to your lawyer, period. Because their whole job is to try to make a finding that they're not responsible. Right. Their client isn't responsible. So always be very candid, forthcoming with your insurance company so that they can protect you. That's the number one thing.
Got it.
And call them right away. Because if depending on the scope of the accident, your car might be totaled, your car might be inoperable. You're going to need to exercise your protections to have a rental vehicle. We're so mobile in our society, and if you have a family and you have children and a spouse and all of those things, you've got to have your horse, so to speak, that can take you to wherever you go in the course of a day. And when your vehicle's totaled and disabled, then you need to talk to your insurance company right away so that they can make arrangements, and they have the ability to do that, to either the vehicle delivered to you or you go to wherever they ask you to, whether it's any of the car rentals, enterprise or whatever, and get get your car replaced while they're doing the repairs. And because we're coming out of the pandemic and other things, there's no speed there. Your car could be in the garage for a month to 6 weeks getting repairs, and because of the backlog and what have you, and so that rental vehicle becomes very important to get you to where you need to go, to employment, family, all of those things. So immediately give notice to your insurance company. They're there to help you. They'll bend over backwards quite often to make that happen, and give them a statement. Don't worry about, they're there to help. And if you clearly didn't cause it, be very candid with them and let them know exactly what happened. And in most of these accidents, the insured didn't do anything wrong. They were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. So you have to trust your insurance company to do the right thing, and most often they do.
Well, that's good to know. I mean, that really is good to know, because I know people are afraid of even their own insurance company at times. Oh, yeah, the other insurance company. I don't think they're quite as friendly and willing to help. But, when I maybe need an operation or need something in my, with my health insurance, I'll tell the insurance company, so, okay, there you go. We'll pay for it. Go get it. I go get it. And 4 months, 5 months, 7 months later, I needed something else. They, well, okay, go get it. You haven't waived anything because, you got it the first time. Does the other insurance company kind of work like that? If they call me up and say, go get this thing, and, then let's talk.
Almost never, Steve. In fact, their whole bottom line is to limit what they have to pay you, and so you can't trust them, and that's how they operate. And occasionally I'm pleasantly surprised, but I've only been pleasantly surprised a few times in 30 years with an adverse carrier. They just don't, their whole job is to limit what they have to pay out because of that loss. And if they can minimize it, they'll do it in a second. So you can trust your carrier in most situations, and you can't trust the adverse carrier. And to do so is just poor reasoning, for lack of a better way to put it. It's an adversarial system, and people forget that their job is to limit what they pay you, so you can't trust them, and that's the bottom line.
Are there ways we should kind of know? Again, if we happen to call them or they call us and we talk to them before getting hold of you, are they going to try to do something under the table?
They invented the word bad faith litigation. We're not that far removed from the days that they would go into the hospital room and somebody sitting there with a brain injury and talk them into resolving it for $500 or $1,500 or something like that. Sometimes they just don't have any ethics at all. So the best thing to do is just not to talk to them. Tell them that be courteous and respectful, but tell them that I need to talk to my insurance company. I need to talk to my lawyer. And don't contact me anymore, and go from there, because you don't have a duty to discuss anything with them. That's why you have your insurance company to take care of it. If the injuries are that extensive, contact an injury lawyer like myself, who spends all his time protecting those people that didn't do anything wrong except be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And
So you get to talk to the insurance company. I don't have to.
yes. And
So what are your interactions with the insurance company, and how does that kind of work in the case?
well, it depends on the insurance company, and most important thing is I establish a baseline and don't come across it. And I'll tell you, if you're across it, I'll push you right back across it. And that's, as a lawyer, especially in injury work with the adverse carrier, they know where it is, and usually they don't do anything that way out of line. Occasionally you get them trying to explore the factual situation in order to gain an advantage. And so it's my job to try to push them back or rub it in their face, literally, not reach out with my palm of my hand and rub their face, but push whatever they're trying to do back and just say no. And there's ways we can do that when we're in negotiations with them. If you're actually negotiating on money damages for an injury case and they're doing something that's way out of bounds, I have no compulsion about telling them that and using the word bad faith. Yep. I've got one. I actually walked in this morning, and one of the first things I see on an email is a communication from an insurance company on the East Coast that because a policeman wasn't there to monitor what happened on an accident right out here on 26 down by the zoo, where a semi truck moved over and a tractor and caused multiple impacts, and my client ended up in a collision with the retaining wall. So I had 3 impacts: concussion with loss of consciousness, multiple soft tissue injuries, and I prepared a settlement demand, and they come back and attack us. Oh, there wasn't any policeman to see this. You can't prove it, etc. And my client didn't do anything but driving to work into Portland early one morning to go open. He was a store manager, and to open up the store, and here's this devastating accident. And the insurance company, used to be that these bad faith tactics that you would see at times. With this insurance company, it was like beating through a wall just to get them to acknowledge us. And so the whole focus with them, and I hadn't seen a lot of this before the pandemic, but it seems like it empowered them to make poor choices, I guess is how I would put it. And no excuse. And so the bottom line on my story today is I walked in and when they gave us a garbage offer on the case a couple weeks ago, and then I got permission from the client to send them back a message. Because the insurance company on the adverse expects you to come down thousands of dollars in a settlement demand, while they go up $500.
Yeah.
And so I sent him a message. And the message is the offer they had given us didn't even take into consideration the $15,000 or $16,000 in medical expenses.
Yeah.
And just made us an offer on BI. Well, who's going to pay the docs?
Yeah.
Who's going to pay the people? Because in this situation, there was no PIP file. And people can make poor choices at times, or if they live out of the state of Oregon and move to Oregon, they can actually waive PIP files, which is for lack of a payment of a premium that really isn't that much. It can come back to roost in your house because you made a choice not to purchase something that was there to benefit you. And that's the key. So to wrap up that story, I sent them a very strong message by only coming down a couple $100 from our total demand, and they realized it and wrote me back, and there's a counter offer that still doesn't take into consideration the thousands of dollars that are outstanding in medical expenses. So that tells me that insurance company and that whole situation, that they're using a lot of bad faith.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, is there anything you can do about it? There's all these coverages you just talked about, but I mean, can any of them ever cover, like, the attorney fees they're going to be running up because of their bad faith?
And there is second party bad faith, and there is a second party bad faith statute in Oregon for negotiations on settlements and things like that. So eventually, if you put everything together, you can sue that carrier for the bad faith. But the problem is that a lot of the carriers trade that black hat, that bad faith hat, at different times. Since I've been practicing it since the 90s, they seem to change, and somebody else, they drop that stuff, and then suddenly you've got a different carrier that wasn't doing that that's now doing it. So the carrier that I'm mentioning in my story is not one of the ones that we usually see on the TV that are advertising to protect you. It's a different one, but
Yeah.
But you're right, Steve. It increases when you've got an insurance company operating in bad faith. It increases the amount of time that I have to spend getting my client to the finish line and getting them money as compensation, and getting the medical expenses paid and what have you. And some of this comes into, but I have to get the client to the finish line. Then at that point, we don't usually represent the insurance company that's in primary position with our client, that they're the insured, and getting them reimbursement. There's a whole process for inter-insurer arbitration to get, say if it was hypothetically State Farm involved, and they insured my client, and my client burned up the $15,000 in their PIP file between temporary disability payments and medical expenses, then they can do inter-insurer arbitration with the other insurance company and ensure that they get paid. And so there's mechanisms to take part of that, but you have to get your client to the finish line and get their damages. So, and when you've got an insurance company playing bad faith against you, or not taking responsibility because they're maximizing their return for their shareholders, then you're having to increases your work exponentially.
Yeah.
That means that by the time you get your client to the finish line, whatever you get is minuscule compared to what you should have got.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just labor-wise, because a lawyer, we measure our time by hours that we put into it. And even though we're not working on an hourly retainer at a certain rate, our time is very valuable. And if the insurance company doesn't respect anybody, because they don't at times, then that lack of respect is increasing the hours that I have to put in, and takes away our profit margin and limits what I can get for the client. And so you have to really wait for some real bad faith before you sue for it in a second party situation, because it's very hard even to prove that they're bad, as bad as they are. So it's just a system that doesn't work well for a person who is just in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Right. And it obviously doesn't work well for any person who has a serious accident that they're not at fault with to try to handle this themselves, it seems.
Oh, no, these people do it every day, and they prey upon you and tell you anything you want to hear, and then they don't come through. So technically, your insurance company usually will bend over backwards to help you, and that's what they're there for.
Yeah.
But once they become adverse, watch out.
Yeah, exactly. And it kind of leads back to what you said, especially in the coverage that covers yourself and your passengers or that kind of uninsured motorists, is that get as much as you can, because that pot is not probably as angry as the other pot that is out there with the other insurance company.
Well, the real problem is that the whole system is controlled by the insurance companies.
Yeah.
And so what you get, you're not being made whole by this
Right.
process. Is the real problem.
Right.
And when you empower companies like that, it's just a poor choice. We need a better system. And it's kind of broken, for lack of a better way to put it.
Yeah. So we are unfortunately run out of time. Just goes by too fast. Before we do leave and say goodbye, is there any one last little quick tidbit or something you would want to leave in someone's mind about this whole thing?
Always explore the highest limits that you can get in order to protect you and your family. Your family is that important, and yourself is. And if you're the primary wage earner in the family, then they can't afford to have you disabled because of somebody not paying attention or because of careless conduct. So please spend more on your insurance. Don't get minimum limits. Get limits of 50, 100 or 100, 300. It's well worth the coverage and the protections that it will give you if something bad does happen. And we see more and more of it because of society, too much traffic, people in a rush, all of these things. So please focus on spending a little bit more money on your insurance coverage so that you have some protections there that you can rely on if you're out on a morning when somebody's not driving and using their focus and their attention when they're driving their automobile. As you know, Steve, that's to get hit by an automobile is really bad. And it's real easy to sustain soft tissue injuries and spinal injuries. So coverage, the whole system is run by coverage. Please spend a little more to make sure that you have adequate coverage. I would tell every client that, Steve.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. That was wonderful. So really, again, before I take off or we take off, thank you for joining us today to talk about this, Terry.
And thank you, Steve. And I want to thank our staff, Miss Alina, for helping set this up and doing a fantastic job so that we can get this message out to the public and to prospective clients so that they can make some good choices, whether or not they were to stay with us or to come to us to seek advice and protections in that we give to maximize their damages. We just want to see them make good choices, get lots of protection so that you don't have to be in a bad situation because of a careless driver. That's
great advice. That's just really great personal and legal and helpful in any way advice. So thanks again. And everyone else, thank you for joining us today. Of course, if anyone has, you bet. If anyone has any further questions on today's topic, you can post it here. We can get you connected with Terry. And until next time, stay safe, stay happy, and be well.